we're talking about closing the deal, but I think arguably the hardest part is actually getting someone to listen to us in the first place. So at this point, I think we've already done a lot of the hard work. We've gotten someone to agree to meet with us. We've then actually gotten them to take a next step, which is giving us some information about their plan, more information about their business, their employees, so that we can quantify a problem for them. And now we're at the point where we've mutually agreed, us and the prospect, that there's a problem that needs to be fixed, and we need to figure out if we're the right solution. They need to figure out if we're the right solution. So what we're going to focus on here today are things to better equip us for finalist presentations, for ensuring after those finalist presentations that we've actually closed the deal, that we can do that, and some tips and best practices for making sure that the time investment that we're spending to close these deals is actually worth it. And we've got some great panelists with us here that can offer their insight and expertise on how they go about preparing their teams for finalist meetings and some of the things that they do as follow-up items to ensure that they also close their deals. Anything that gentlemen would like to add?
Yeah, I think, first of all, great to see everyone. But when you talk about closing the deal, I always really think that the preponderance of the lift there is prior to walking into the conference room or the Zoom screen, as it may be. So it's all the preparation, it's all the research, it's all the due diligence and learning about the culture of the organization, the questioning, to really understand what the needs are to address and position your solution. The other aspect of that, if I can interject too, is in reality, when we're asking questions, even when we're at our best with active listening, we only retain about 25 to 50% of what we hear. So one of the things that I always like to do is to make sure during those critical discovery or data collection conversations, invite someone from your team to be part of that conversation, particularly if that's a member maybe of your service team or maybe a member of your compliance team that might have a different lens to that conversation. It's amazing when you recap a conversation that you've had with different perspectives, how many different angles that you're able to collectively pick up on.
No, I think that's fantastic. So I'm Brian Houston from Voya Investment Management, but yeah, you've identified the problem. You feel like you have a competent solution. And I think that's a great example that Dave says is throwing it to your team, talking to other people within the organization and say, hey, does this make sense? How would you approach this? You've worked hard to get to this point, so you don't want to screw this up at this point. So I think that's fantastic.
So one of the big themes of our presentation or session today is that in these finalist meetings, we've already gotten some buy-in from our prospects that we have, or some acknowledgement rather, that we have the technical expertise, right? We wouldn't be at this stage if they didn't think that we had the capabilities, the resources, the team to address their problems. If they are going to put us in front of their committee, their executive leadership team, et cetera. But one of the things I think that often goes overlooked in a lot of these meetings is that at this point, we have to switch our focus a little bit from being the technical expert to being also a technical expert, but a salesperson, right? We are going into these finalist meetings partly to entertain, partly to keep people, on their toes and put forth a representation of our entire team that we're fun to work with, that it's going to be a really great partnership between the groups at the table. So if we go to the next slide here, we wanted to start us off with this picture, right? Who better to entertain a crowd than Mr. Jordan Belfort, right? He's got, right, if you notice, there's confetti in the background. He's got the pinstripe suit, the cufflinks, the pink shirt. This guy is an entertainer, right? He's juicing up his entire team in the same way that we kind of have to juice up the entire committee when we go in for that finalist meeting, right? If we're boring, that's probably the worst thing that we can do in that meeting. So making sure that we're, bringing up a lot of things that are exciting and energetic, but also that relate specifically to their business, we kind of have to bring all of those together. So the first thing that we wanted to talk about today is how we prepare our team to better Oh, thank you. How we prepare our team to better handle, finalist presentations. Assigning, some of the basics are assigning, roles to specific sections, whether it be the investments or the financial education and wellness or target date funds, et cetera. But some of the biggest sales mistakes, these are things that we actively review before we go into a finalist meeting, and we wanted to share these with you as well. So just starting from the top, winging it, right? Some of these are going to be really common sense, but we actively look at these each time we go through in preparation for a finalist meeting. Being too informative versus persuasive kind of gets back to the same point of, we're coming into this meeting because we want to persuade them that we are the right solution, right? We've helped them identify the problem. Now they're looking at us and probably a couple other firms. We may even know the other firms that are in this meeting or in the other meetings that they're reviewing. And so we want to make sure that we're crafting our persuasive arguments on why we are the right fit to help them solve their problems, to help their employees advance their financial goals. Misusing the allotted time, again, this goes back to what Dave said, right? We have to prepare ourselves by meeting with our key point of contact to figure out what are the key areas that they want to address. And providing inadequate support, I think, is a no-brainer. But I'll turn things over just for a second to the panelists here, and I think they have a lot of insight for ways that they prepare their team, ways they also prepare themselves, but ways that they prepare their team before going into a finalist meeting. There's some things that they have on their, absolutely do not do this list, and things that they do on or have on their do list. So I'll turn things over first to Dave.
Yeah, thanks. So in terms of winging it, I think preparation is really the key here. And one of the things that I always try to be very mindful of is a lot of the people that are partaking in a finalist conversation may not be used to committee meetings, or that might not be their comfort zone. So if you're bringing in a member from the operations team that is a wizard on a certain area, but may not feel fully comfortable in a finalist meeting, the objective there is to make sure that they're at their best, to make sure that they're speaking to their knowledge, and we're not putting them in a situation where they're operating outside of their comfort zone. So that's one of the things I've always found to be helpful with regard to supporting the conversation. The other aspect that I always like to do is to understand who's going to be in the room, who's going to be part of the committee, and each person on our team is going to deliver a message specifically to somebody on that committee. So whether it's a general counsel or whether it's a CFO, maybe it's the HR director, each person on our team is there to have a specific message that's catered to somebody on that buying committee. So that's another important facet, to make sure that everyone on that committee is being engaged.
One of the things I think that's unique to your team is that there may be this rule about not saying no in a finalist meeting. Can you talk a little bit more about what that rule is and how that came about?
Yeah, so I mean, certainly, and I think this is where research comes in, first of all, in terms of being prepared. But in terms of not saying no, I think being flexible, being able to accommodate the needs of our prospect is key. And I would say, though, too, and this is something that we'll practice from time to time, is if we have a relationship manager or an operational specialist, they'll be very candid about how things are best run. And sometimes they'll correct me in a meeting to talk about, here's how we're able to best support this. And ultimately what it does is it's going to give a lot of credibility to them in their ability to support and make sure things are running smoothly.
One of the things you also had mentioned to me on one of our earlier calls is that if the answer is leading to a no, right? If it's a capability they're asking about that maybe we don't have, let's try to figure out what the reason behind the ask is, so that we can uncover the root of the problem. And there's a lot of examples, but I think I'll turn things over to Brian to talk about some things, Brian, that maybe you and your team discuss internally.
Yeah, absolutely.
To prepare for these.
A quick show of hands. Anyone in this room ever work with Jeff Hemker? A couple. Jeff Hemker was a sales legend. He was a good friend of mine that worked at Invesco. He passed away. But I always remember when I saw this, they were talking about winging it. He did a red suit example. So his story was he showed up to a bank in advance at 9:30 in the morning. He did not have a prep call. This is a perfect example of winging it. He shows up, he's military. He's prepared, he's early, he looks like someone you want to do business with. Then the advisor rolls up. He has a 3-piece red polyester suit and sunglasses. And this is exactly how he goes into the meeting. And then the plan sponsor asks 5 times, what is your role and how am I going to work with this guy in the red suit? And the guy keeps pointing to Jeff saying, you're going to work with him. I'm like, you're the advisor. I think the most important thing in this situation is appearance matters, and you have to know your role. Every time we walk into these meetings, we all know exactly what we're going to do. But Jeff was just horrid with that red 3-piece polyester suit, and the guy wore sunglasses. So I don't think they won the business because they weren't prepared. But if you're working with a client, it's a $10 million plan. They want to work with someone that looks presentable. The other thing I'll just touch on is misusing the allotted time. I mean, we're on Zooms every day, 5 times a day. I am a nut. If I'm going to take a client, 5 minutes past, 10 minutes past, you have to ask the question, how do you look? How do I look on your calendar? Do you have another 5 minutes that we could expand upon that? Is there anything that I didn't solve for you? We have 60 seconds. Is there anything I can solve for you? Do not take for granted. They are busy. They don't want to sit there and hear you just talk and talk and talk. We're all salespeople, and we're all very good at talking. So don't take their calendar. Just be patient and use your time, and don't overstay your welcome is the biggest things I'll say.
That is a big thing. I will just reiterate, a big thing for our team, whether it's a internal, external call, prospect call, finalist call, in-person meeting, whatever it is, we do not extend beyond the allotted time. We'll make sure that, and someone will be prepared. We'll review this in our prep meetings. Someone will be prepared to be the person that cuts off the person as we get to like the 3-minute mark, the 2-minute mark, to make sure that we have enough time to address our close and move forward.
And you have a subtle sign.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Not this.
So a couple other things that are on our list before we go into a finalist meeting. These are, again, some biggest sales presentation mistakes. Failing to close the sale. So oftentimes we go into a meeting, we don't really maybe get the next step, especially if it's a finalist meeting, because we already know why we're there. They're there to hire a new advisor, right? Especially if they've told us that explicitly. At the end of our presentations, we like to ask them, professionally for their business. We think that we've addressed a lot of the things today. I'll even say sometimes I'd like to, make sure that before we go, we formally, ask you for your business because we think it would be great to work with you. That kind of establishes the next step right there in person. Going back to, I think, the overall theme being boring. No one likes to sit in an in-person meeting, but it's probably even worse to sit on a Zoom call finalist meeting and be boring. You can tell really well when someone's not paying attention to you over a Zoom call, right? Because they're looking at their screen over here and their screen over here, and they're looking at their phone down here, and they might be petting the dog down here. So you can get a real good glimpse of, especially on these Zoom calls, whether people are paying attention. Harder to tell, right, when you're in person with someone, whether they're actually tracking and following along sometimes, because it might be more up in the head if they don't have a computer screen in front of them. And then relying too much on visual aids, distracting gestures and body language. Along these lines, I'll turn things maybe over to Brian first. What are some of the things here, or maybe some additional things that you would prepare your team on and address these areas for a finalist presentation?
Yeah, I would just highlight number 5, failing to close the sale. We all walked into this room. We know there are 3 pain points. Did we cover all of these specifically with you? And then next, when do you expect to make a decision? I'm not going to walk out and wait for Jeff to say, hey, Jeff, I haven't seen you in 3 months. What happened? I want to know a timeline of when I can actually hope to hear something back is important. So you have a timeline. I don't want to pester them. I don't want to call you on Monday. I want to be respectful of your process, but just knowing their timeline. And then lastly, body language is so important. Tom hit on it, but yeah, just people in these meetings, they're just looking down at their phone. Their arms are crossed. they're just doodling. They're completely not interested. You have to identify quickly in your head, is this a decision maker? Is this someone that I'm not getting their attention? What can I do? I've done research. I know everyone in this room. What do they like? Try to bring them back into the conversation, but read body language. I think there's some great studies and great information out there, but you can do that with your spouse and your kids. Are they actually paying attention, or are they just wandering around? So.
And one of the favorite things that I'll do in preparation for a finals meeting is practice with somebody that's not in our industry, that may not be riveted by 408B2 disclosures and things of that sort. But that is fantastic feedback in terms of what may register and what might be falling flat. But I think having that feedback is really helpful. The other thing that I've certainly noticed is the duration of a lot of our finals conversations is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And 45-minute final meetings are becoming a norm, or 60-minute final meetings. So in terms of being concise with what your value add is, and being able to articulate that in a sentence, I think is really critical as well, in terms of being able to articulate why work with us is another aspect. The other thing too, a lot of finals that are occurring over Zoom, I'll encourage our team to stand up. If you're sitting in a chair, if you're talking to a screen all day, sometimes it's easy to lose energy or not sound excited when you're addressing a group. So when you're standing up, I think that naturally gives you a little bit more energy that conveys effectively over a Zoom conversation.
One other thing, if I could add on the Zoom portion, is when you're not speaking, at Voya, we try to do this, we shut the camera off so that they're not sitting there watching what Dave is doing specifically. So you shut the camera off, and also at the end of the meeting, take your slides down so you can just look them in the eyes and you can see them. But it just helps get their focus back so they're not just watching that dog in the background and say, oh, what is he doing now? Because I've been on so many painful Zooms, and that's all you're doing is looking at the backgrounds of the people, their houses, their pets. Shut the camera off and let them focus on exactly what you're trying to do here.
Couple other items here on our biggest sales presentation mistakes. Wearing inappropriate dress. You'd think that some of these are like common sense, but oftentimes, we'll have, one of the things that we do before a finalist presentation, we'll actually ask the client or the prospect at that point in time, what's the attire for your workforce? We have lost a deal before because we showed up in suits, and that is way far away from what the attire and dress code. We looked way out of place in their room, and we saw our competitors coming in after the fact, much more casual. After that, we started asking every single time, even stuff as simple as, what's the exact address of your business, right? Google's great, we can pull it up, but sometimes they may have their headquarter building, they may have a large office park, and they may have offices in one of the buildings, they may have offices in another building. You want to make sure that you're showing up to the right place. I mean, these are just things that we cross off on our to-do list every time that we're getting ready for a meeting. Technology, demonstration failures. We have all had issues on Zoom. No one's been immune to that. So sometimes what we like to do is actually schedule a technology prep call, or at least offer that to our prospects before we have this meeting. One, it shows, we're most often working with one of our contacts, our main contacts, as the liaison to the committee. Not always are we going to get this call, but it doesn't really matter if we get the call, because what we're doing in asking or offering to have this, technology prep to make sure everything's working is showing that we're, more prepared, right? We're taking an extra step, regardless of whether we have that actual call. We're taking a step to show them that, hey, we're doing our preparation. We want this to be the best meeting without any flaws, and I think that does go a long way. Verbal missteps, an obvious one. Failure to create a connection with the listeners. I think Brian had mentioned, engaging with the people in the room. We've all sat through very, boring presentations before, but if we actually start engaging with the people, asking questions, that's a good way to change the dialogue. I will say I have had presentations where our committee members have told us, our group does not like to engage. We want you to come into the meeting, and we want you to introduce yourself and start, speaking. And if we have questions, we will ask questions. Members of our team will ask questions, but that's not how we engage. we probably, if we had not asked some of those questions on, how do we engage, what are some of the key points to make sure that we address everybody appropriately, we probably would have missed that. And, it probably would have not been a meeting that, they were most comfortable with. So again, I would just say these are some of the items that we look for, or, make sure that we address with our team as we prepare people for a finalist presentation. And I would suggest adding these 12 items to, whether it is a closing the deal finalist meeting or even a prospect call. These are just some good things to keep in mind before we have those meetings. The next section here that we'll talk about is best practices for actually closing the deal. So the first section we just talked about was more so, preparing our team, making sure that when we go to this finalist presentation, everyone's operating, in the same way and in the same direction. Here, best practices for closing the deal, these are the things that you might want to do as you actually prepare for the meeting. So I think it was also Brian who said, identify your most persuasive arguments. I'm a big fan of writing down and memorizing some of the key points that I make sure that I definitely want to get across during the meeting, some of those key selling points, so that I'm prepared to deliver them in the way that they should be delivered. So I think, and you had also said, Dave, practice and perfect your persuasive key points. I'll give an example of one. I knew going into a meeting with the chief operating officer of a golf course about a month ago was going to be kind of difficult because the retirement plan is a very small part of his job responsibility, and they were working with not a retirement plan specialist, and that was going to be a big part of our value add. And it's oftentimes, I think a lot of us have difficulties getting someone to understand the difference between, working with a non-specialist retirement advisor and working with a true specialist, and why that can make, a big difference for a business owner or an officer of a company. So I was thinking, how can we relate that to, this person? And I'm starting to think about all the analogies that I can come up with, but the best one that I thought for this COO was, Brad, you probably wouldn't let the guy who comes over to my house and mows my lawn, take care of your championship course, right? Like, they've probably got some of the same tools. Do they come in a truck? Do they have, a lawnmower? Do they have clippers, et cetera? They might have some of the same tools, but they don't have, the actual resources, the team, the, deep expertise in managing your championship course. And I think that was one of the things that, I had prepared to, step in with if I wasn't able to make the connection on why it was truly going to be beneficial for them to work with us. And that was one of my, I thought at the time, maybe still do think it was a pretty good point, but that was the one way that I was able to, address that committee member in the meeting. Anything else that Dave, Brian, you do before going into a finalist meeting to research the company, your decision makers, et cetera, get a leg up on who you're meeting with?
Yeah, there's so much information out there, obviously with social media, with Facebook even, to understand some of the personal causes or interests that may resonate with the decision maker. So I think understanding those is hugely helpful. And an example of that would be, we had a conversation, and one of the committee members was very involved with the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And that was something that was very prominent on their LinkedIn. They put it on their Facebook page as well. So that was something where we were able to share how we've engaged with that organization, and it just created a commonality in terms of understanding what made him tick and how we're able to support that. So there's so many avenues out there to understand what a person's all about. You have artificial intelligence resources that I don't understand how to tap into, but I think there's so many things that we can leverage to really understand who we're talking to.
I'll just add LinkedIn. Raise your hand if you do not have a LinkedIn profile. I use LinkedIn all the time. I want to see how long they've been there, where they went to college, and then you look on, Facebook, Twitter. You want to see what are they into personally, because you want to make that personal connection with them. That helps a lot. And then their corporate websites, you guys should always know a lot about their company. Look through their history, what kind of transactions, any recent purchases, acquisitions, anything out there. But you should know what this company does down cold. You don't want to walk in there and go, oh, you do that. This is not an exploratory learning what they do. They hope you understand what they produce on a daily basis. But knowing the company and knowing the people in the room and knowing their backgrounds, I think helps get a leg up.
And Brian, just to piggyback on your LinkedIn comment, a lot of times if you're not directly linked in with somebody, but maybe it's going to show you a lineage of common people that you are connected with. So if you have someone that you can reach out to say, hey, tell me about John Smith, that's another great way to leverage information. Another aspect is a lot of times you might be introduced to an opportunity by an officer or somebody of prominence within an organization. But that's another phenomenal way to leverage that relationship, to understand the organization, what initiatives they have ahead of them, what obstacles they have or they're trying to overcome. So again, it's just a great way to understand more about the people we're talking to.
And I'll focus on the last point here that we have customize, because there's one way that I found a lot of success in customizing at least our sales material, our presentation going into a meeting. And it's something I've done where we've actually had some of our CFO prospects stop the whole meeting on some of the pages where we've done this level of customization to, and I'll show you in just a minute, but where we've done this customization, they've stopped the meeting and said how cool this is. I'd love all of my CFO prospects to stop our meeting and point out something that we're doing that's super cool. We ended up winning the business, by the way, but one of the things that we've done to customize our presentations and satisfy the show me, you know me aspect of the sale a little bit is viewing their Facebook. All these organizations have Facebook profiles, and they put on a lot of pictures. Doesn't matter if you're a manufacturer, you're a nonprofit, regardless, they have tons of photos on their Facebook pages, and we can use these as the backgrounds in our presentations to really show that we've done our research, right? Like we're coming in prepared. This is not a presentation just about us and our firm. Yeah, we've got our logo there, but we've also got yours, and we're not using our standard marketing templates. We're really creating a presentation that's all about you. And we've had a lot of success doing this. It's very easy to do. And if anyone wants to, learn more about how to do it, I'm happy to show you. But this has been one of the key things that we've done that's really made a big difference in our meetings. Like I said, we've had CFOs stop us on some pages. Hey, Tom, I've got to show, this is so cool. I've got to show this to our CEO. That was exactly what he said. And that's, there's no better indicator there that you might be getting hired. So I would highly encourage you to look at all of the media, right? If you go on someone's website, you scroll all the way down to the bottom, they usually have the Twitter, the LinkedIn, the Facebook, the YouTube. I focus mostly on the YouTube and Facebook because Facebook, you get a lot of pictures. YouTube, that's normally where they're posting, they're posting actual videos of like their workplace, how they're engaging their clients. This is how they're marketing themselves out to their clients and prospects. And if we can align ourselves with that, get a better understanding of how they are engaging with their clients and prospects, helps us to better understand and engage with them. What are some of the things, Dave and Brian, that you do to customize your presentations maybe toward your clients and prospects?
Yeah, so just that, I think visual is always important. One of the things that we always want to understand is what's the naming convention for an employee at the organization? That's another great way to understand that that you've researched and you're connecting with how they address their employees. The other thing is learning how to pronounce the committee members' names or key people's names. It's basic. But literally there are websites that will help with pronunciation for names that might not be familiar to you, or it's asking to make sure that you're not mispronouncing the owner of the company's last name. So, pretty basic, but pretty important things to make sure we're doing too.
One thing I would add to that also is that's super important, right, about class or how you identify the employee. One is if you're working with a nonprofit, the biggest turnoff that I found is if you use the word company. Right, business works, organization works. They use business a lot, and that's okay. But company to a nonprofit doesn't stick too well. And so keeping in mind those kind of things, like using faculty and staff if it's a school, that's big. It's the little things that help you to present that you know about their business. But sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, Brian.
No, it's fonts, colors, logos. I've seen in the past, we've done some fun videos. So outside of the Voya Connecticut office, I mean, it was all the employees standing out there saying, hey, we want you to be part of the Voya family. You have everyone in their orange shirts. I think that was very cool. But the last thing I'll add is customization. So anyone seen the movie Air yet? Just one hand? You guys have some work to do this weekend. So the whole movie Air is about Michael Jordan. So they had to go close the sale, Nike did. So it was Nike, Adidas, and Converse. And you know why Nike won the business? Because they customized. Because they went to the Converse store, they went to their finals meeting, and Converse said, these are the shoes that Larry Bird wore. These are the shoes Magic Johnson wore. That's not the shoes that they want to wear. They want to wear something specific, customized to their situation. Adidas, the same thing, the classic stripes. That's all they did. But what did Nike do? They were so desperate to get in the basketball business, they created Michael Jordan his own shoe down to the Bulls colors, black, white, red. They blew him away. They went down and they really went out of their way to customize their pitch. And that's why he went with Nike, who at the time was just a fledgling shoe company. And I think it turned out pretty well for Nike looking back. So customize is very important. And all of you need to go to the movies. I've seen Top Gun, and I've seen Air since COVID. So you guys need to do your part and get back in the movies. So
I will add that this level of customization, even just with the presentations, if you do nothing else, the time investment that you're looking at is maybe 10 to 15 minutes. If you really want to find like the best picture that they might have, highest quality that's going to look great in a presentation, whether you're sharing it virtually over a Zoom or a Teams meeting, WebEx, et cetera, or printing it out because they look great printed too. But it really only takes about 5 to 10 minutes. And I would argue that that's a pretty good investment of time, because once again, when we're at this stage, a lot of the hard work is done, right? We've gotten someone to take the meeting, we've helped them to identify that an issue exists, and they want to solve it, and they're going to see if we're the right solve, we're the right solution, the right firm to fix it. And if we can just do a couple things to give us a competitive edge, especially something like this where it doesn't take that long for us to do it, it's definitely something that we would recommend.
And maybe one more thing to share. We received feedback on an opportunity, the Boston Globe. It's my hometown newspaper, and it's always interesting to see what's retained by a committee member after a meeting. But the feedback we got was similar to what one of your clients shared, was they love the fact that we used the Boston Globe font throughout the presentation, right? Something so simple, but it resonated with them. So I think that really shows the power of customization and making sure that we're being thoughtful.
Absolutely. I would rather have my clients and prospects point something out like that and then leave away with that, because then we're getting to their emotional side rather than making slight comparisons maybe in technical areas, right? So now let's focus on the next part is, and I think when we're in a finalist meeting, when we're in a presentation, I don't think the closing necessarily starts until we're about 80% of the way through the presentation. But from that point on is when I think that we're really in closing mode, especially you could say maybe when you walk out of the meeting also, but that's really, I feel like when we start getting into the situation where, okay, now we're in a position where we need to make sure that we're doing the hardest work to close this opportunity. So a couple of best practices that we have, handwritten thank you cards. Something so simple, again, probably even less time than putting the presentation, the pictures together in the presentation, but these thank you cards go a long way. And they also help you do another thing, which I think is really important. You're gonna have this finalist meeting, you're gonna have a prospect call. Then you're gonna send, of course, everybody's gonna send a follow-up email, right? There's a time window probably of what's acceptable time and what's not to follow up on that email. This gives you a touch point that's not through email, not through the phone. It's an alternative, it's an alternative medium that, they're still thinking about you, shows that you're still thinking about them. And if you can time these handwritten cards to go out, the day or 2 days after your meeting, they're gonna get them. The mail's actually really fast. So they get them in, 3 or so days. Then it gives you a little bit of flexibility with your next follow-up. And I think that, at least for me, that's been one of the most impactful things that we've done is sending these handwritten cards. And we have a pretty good track record on when we do send the cards and when we don't send the cards, whether it's a prospect, first intro meeting or a finalist, are we going to get that next step? You send the card, you're more likely to get the next step. Again, it's kind of simple, but it's one of those things that we really believe in. The other thing I would say is a lot of companies, nonprofits, for-profits, they have events pages on their websites. In terms of, again, closing, wanting to make sure that you're doing everything that you can possibly do to share or to show that you are all in on this prospect, visit their events page. See if they have anything going on. I've gone to a recycling event from a waste management company. I've gone to for another nonprofit in LA. I went to one of their community winter gatherings, getting out and met with the CEO and the CFO there and just hanging out with them, getting out, a lot of volunteering opportunities, other opportunities to get in front of your prospect. You get a lot of credit for that. And I would recommend checking out some of those event pages too. What are some of the things that you guys do after that finalist meeting to put yourself in a better position to ensure that the deal closes?
I'll just add the personal card is fantastic. And maybe it's because I don't trust the mail. But one thing that we've done is we send it FedEx or UPS because I guarantee you they're going to open that package. They're going to think, oh, wow, this is urgent. This is just not something on the counter. I'm going to open this immediately. So that's just a little quick trick that we've done is spend the extra $5, $10 and put it in a FedEx or UPS because I guarantee they're going to open that. First thing in the morning when they walk in, they see a stack. They're going to hopefully open up that. So that's just something we did a little custom.
Nothing new to add, but just think of your own personal behavior when you go to the mailbox and you have a stack of mail that you retrieve and you're going through the mail. What do you open first, right? If there's a card that looks like it's from grandma, right, and it's handwritten and all that, that's the first thing I'm opening. And I always get excited about that. So, and I don't get a lot of those. So not even on my birthday. So I feel like, I feel like that's certainly an opportunity to differentiate yourself. It's something that's pretty simple to do, but even with that, not a lot of people are doing it. So just to underscore what's been said, I think that's a fantastic resource.
I've switched dentists because I got a handwritten card from a dentist when I moved to a new place here in Huntington Beach. Actually, I switched dentists. Thought that was kind of interesting. So again, if it works on me, it must work on some other people too. The last thing that we would leave you with here is after these meetings, really important that we have some items on standby that we can get over to our prospect immediately, right? We want to make sure that we're following up same day. That's very, very critical. And having some of these pieces of information on hand, always helpful. Examples of client work are probably the best pieces of information to have on hand. And then as we think about that follow-up process, having our follow-up email, maybe having the card go out the next couple days so that they get it in a couple days, then sharing maybe on an ongoing basis examples of client work as they continue to make their decision. That's the time where you want to be front and center and actively reaching out to them on a consistent basis. Anything you guys want to add here? Otherwise,
the only thing I'll add is endorsements. I mean, don't go try to chase a client down next week and say, hey, can I use your name? I just met with a client in your same industry or something. I think that's just one of the things you could have is some referrals and endorsements go a long way. Hey, they were actually successful and they did everything that they promised. You should work with them. So
yeah, absolutely. And statistically, sales don't close until, on average, the 7th touch point. So if there's discovery, if there's a finals type of meeting, there are more touch points to be had there. And I think having a strategic drip list of topics that you want to engage the prospect with is critical, just to make sure that your name, your energy, your thoughtfulness is kept in front of them until they're ready to make that decision.
So just to recap, we talked about some things that we do to prepare ourselves and our team before a finalist meeting. We don't want to say the word no to a prospect or to a client, but we also want to make sure that we're not making some of the biggest sales mistakes. We looked at some things for ensuring that we're putting together our best foot forward during that actual finalist meeting. Customization was a big topic that we talked about, and we showed an example on how we do that with some presentation slides. Ensuring that we actually close the deal, I think that's where we get back into the first stage of this whole process that we've been talking about all day of, it's hard to get them on the hook, right, to talk with us in the first place. That's where a lot of the work is. Same amount of work on the closing side once we walk out of that meeting. Those, at least, that's where we think the most important activity takes place.